Hi class. Today we are going to be discussing transport through the cell membrane. So we're going to be focusing on the two major kinds of transport, which you can see there in the picture. Passive transport on the right that does not require energy, and active transport on the left that does. So starting off with passive transport. So it's called passive because it does not need energy. The cell does not have to expend ATP in order to carry it out. Molecules move from a high concentration to a low concentration, which means they're moving from where there are a lot of them to where there are fewer of them. And so we say that is moving down the gradient, going from high to low concentration. Not high to low like altitude high to low, but just from where there's a lot to where there's not as much. Active transport, you just flip all these things around. Active because it requires energy. Molecules are going from where they have a low concentration, there are fewer of them, to where there are more of them. And you have to move against the gradient. So you can kind of think of passive transport as molecules moving kind of like downhill from where it's higher to where it's lower, but in concentration, not in actual height. And active transport, if you want to make something go up a hill, you have to put in energy. So on the left, you can see passive transport. There's a lot of these green molecules on outside the cell. There are fewer inside. So if they just randomly move, as molecules do, more of them will end up going from the outside to the inside. On the right, active transport, we are trying to get these molecules out of the cell, and there's already a lot more outside. So we are going to have to put energy in, maybe with a protein carrier, like in the picture, to pump these molecules out of the cell. That is active transport. Now, within passive transport, you can break down it into three types: simple diffusion, or just diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis. Okay, so simple diffusion, you just have molecules spreading out in the given space or crossing a membrane from high to low concentration. Okay, so shown here, a lot of molecules moving to where there are fewer. Facilitated diffusion is very similar, except the cell is using a transport protein, like a channel. So there are lots of molecules. It's going from high to low, but they're not just going on their own. They have to use a channel or transport protein. That's why it's called facilitated diffusion, because to facilitate something means to help it occur. Osmosis, on the other hand, is the movement of water, which is not shown in this picture. This is when water moves with its gradient, from where there's more water to where there is less. Okay, so a breakdown of diffusion. I just said it's a type of passive transport, so you don't need energy. Molecules go down their gradient from where there are a lot to where there are fewer. If we're talking about crossing through the cell membrane, they move directly through. So things like oxygen and carbon dioxide. Um, Usually, to do that, these molecules have to be small and nonpolar. Okay, as we've discussed before, in order to cross the cell membrane, the phospholipids, it helps to be small and it helps to be not charged, nonpolar. Things that are big and charged have a lot of trouble crossing through. So this is the main way cells take in oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. All right, so we'll take a look at this short clip to demonstrate.
Diffusion is the net movement of a substance from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. Let's use this sugar cube and beaker of water as an example. When the sugar cube is dropped into water, it begins to dissolve. The sugar molecules in the cube move from an area of high concentration to areas of lower concentration until the molecules are evenly distributed. This type of motion is known as diffusion.
So that was just a short animation to demonstrate what we're talking about. Our next kind of transport is facilitated diffusion. Again, no energy is needed. We're still going down the gradient. However, here we are using either a protein channel or a carrier protein to move these molecules. Okay, so these are usually things that are too polar, like water, or too big or charged. Okay, charged like sodium, to cross the membrane on their own, but we still need to move large amounts of them. So, if you need to get food from outside the cell to inside, there's more outside than there is inside. So it can go through special protein channels in the membrane to transport glucose. Glucose is usually too hydrophilic to cross the cell membrane without a channel. And the third type is osmosis. So again, no energy required, but now we are moving water. So we're not moving a solute, not like sodium or carbon dioxide or oxygen. This is the movement of water. So water, most of the time when water moves into or out of cells, it's going through protein channels, okay, called aquaporins. Water can cross the cell membrane, but it's difficult for it because water is quite polar, but water is very small. So sometimes water can fit through, but a lot of water's transport will be through these pores. Okay, but we call this osmosis when water enters and leaves cells because water operates slightly different than the solutes do. All right, to get towards the end here, active transport. Again, these require energy by the cell. This is moving things against the way they would normally move. Um, so starting off, we have endo and exocytosis. Endo means in, exo means out. So endocytosis is the bulk transport of large molecules into the cell. So if you look at this picture, it's kind of like the cell membrane makes like a divot, and then it pinches in to bring these things inside the cell. And then once inside, it can break down um, this little vesicle in order to get this material. Exocytosis is the opposite. Put these things in a vesicle, move it to the cell membrane, it merges and expels them out of the cell. You also have protein pumps. These are proteins in the cell membrane that, with the use of energy from ATP, they can pump things against the direction they would normally go, from low to high concentration. Um, this requires a significant amount of energy to pump these things because they would ideally go the other direction without the cell purposefully inputting energy. But this kind of transport is required for cells to stay alive. They have to get things to go against their gradient quite often. Right, that brings us to the end of this overview of cell transport. So I hope you found it useful. Feel free to look back through it if you missed anything, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.